Hey everyone and welcome to another video, and today I'm doing something a little different. We've got no slides, no gameplay, just me in front of the camera here today talking to you about a few things that I found to be quite interesting based off my findings from my coaching. Now again, I've done quite a lot of coaching this year. Over the past, I'd say 9-ish months, I've done around 1,500 coaching sessions across all ranks, all servers, sometimes with the same clients, sometimes with differing clients. And as a result, I've been able to notice quite a few interesting trends, seen some interesting findings that I thought I'd like to share with you guys in the community, because I think it can really help you on your own solo queue journey. Now, basically the key problem that I'm finding right now in the community and across the board is that people don't really understand how their solo queue journey is influenced by the champion they decide to main. So what we're going to do, we're going to break down differing champions and how they can influence or the type of journey you may, I guess, experience by maining that sort of champion, and just really try and develop a much broader or deeper understanding of how your champion is going to influence your solo queue journey. And doesn't matter what champion you play, you're going to find something or take away some little gem from this video. Now, I want to set the scene with a little bit of an analogy to kind of make sense of this whole thing, because it is a little bit cumbersome to kind of explain. Now, hopefully, a lot of you guys out there, guys and girls, have watched Harry Potter. If not, I mean, I don't know what the hell you're doing. But in Goblet of Fire, there's that scene, towards the end where there's the maze, right? And you've got all the contestants lined up in the maze, and they've all got their own unique entrance, So we've got Harry Potter going there. I think it was like Cedric Diggory and then that other dude. And they're all kind of lined up. And the way I want you to think about this entire video is that each of us have our own unique path on this maze. And the maze is representing our journey towards Challenger. Say like the beginning, the entrance of the maze is like, your unranked, bronze, whatever, something like that. And to get to the cup in the middle of the maze or the end of the maze, that's like Challenger. So we all have our unique path, our unique entrance. And because each of our entrances and our maze path is going to be unique, we're going to face different challenges. If you actually think back to the movie, there was like different challenges they face. The maze did differing things. And depending on our strengths and weaknesses, you might just get lucky and, we might find the first 50% of the maze very easy, but then the 50% of the maze through the 70% of the maze is actually very difficult. You get the point. Everyone's journey is going to be very unique, okay? Now, I want to start by talking about the Malzahar player, okay? Let's talk about a Malzahar player. Very common champion, especially in the low elos. And I want to break down what their journey may look like, okay? So they're going to be off to an absolute banger start. The first 50% of the journey, maybe all the way to Platinum 4, should be relatively smooth sailing. Not many difficulties at all. The champion is very easy to execute. It doesn't really need to overly index on like mechanical optimization. You don't really need to think holistically about the map because your roaming isn't that good. You scale relatively well, have very obvious power spikes, just very simple identity, very simple strategy. But around that halfway point, 50% through the maze, you haven't really faced any difficulties. No, the wall hasn't like collapsed in onto you. No monsters have come out and tried to grab you. Things start to get a little bit tricky. The game pace starts to speed up a little bit. The importance of priority seems to rise up a little bit. There's more skirmishes, more 2v2s, more 3v3s. People start to have a better sense of aggressive posturing in lane. They start to punish your maybe weak early laning. The trading patterns start to get spiced up a little bit. And people start to understand your power troughs a little bit better. So if they see you start Sapphire Crystal, try to go that cheesy futures market strategy, they're going to start to abuse you. Games start to feel a little bit stressful. All this shit's like jumping out of the maze walls. You're like, oh my god, this wasn't like the first 50% of the maze. So progress inevitably starts to slow down big time. And you're going to have to inch very, very slowly from Platinum 4 to Diamond 4 if you want to do it through the lens of Malzahar. Now, this is just purely due to the champion's design. Micro optimization is really bloody hard. It's not intuitive. You're not going to get good mechanically playing Malzahar because you're not really incentivized to improve mechanically. And playing a faster paced game is just awkward. It doesn't feel natural to play a faster paced game with Malzahar. So improving at these aspects of the game becomes very, I guess, it's very strange. It doesn't feel natural. And so in order to increase our success in this ELO bracket, develop these, I guess, differing skill sets, it's very awkward. It's very I guess it just doesn't seem right. So at this point, a lot of people, they start to dislike or even hate the path that they've chosen. They will say things to me like, Curtis, I just don't like Malzahar anymore. I don't want to play this slow, item-oriented, ultimate-reliant champion. I don't want to feel like I'm getting shoved in all the time, losing every 2v2. I want to be able to do things. I don't want to get my jungler screwed by giving up scuttles. I don't want to get my bot lane dove because I'm not getting priority. So in order to actually win with Malzahar, we're going to have to over-index on losing gracefully, walking that tightrope, that pressure tightrope, calling off objectives, saying no to players. Our tempo assessment needs to be really good. We need to avoid, ideally prevent the enemy from roaming, stalling out the games. Our team fight optimization needs to be improved. Well, a lot of people, they don't want to do this. They don't want to improve upon these areas. They just genuinely don't enjoy these parts of the games. So then inevitably they have to make a choice. Do I want to go back to the beginning of the maze and turn back around because I don't want to go down this route anymore? Or do I want to truck on, try and, brute force it, get through to that, that Diamond 4, even though it's going to be an absolute slugfest? At the end of the day, it really depends on what you want to get out of the game and the way you like playing the game. Okay, now one thing to note, even if you backtrack and you go back to the beginning of the entrance, yes, some of the knowledge from that journey will carry on through to the other maze entrance. Like you'll learn a little bit about how the maze functions, but not all of it. And this also largely depends on the champion that you played and the champ that you're picking up afterwards. But we'll touch on this later on. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to color the picture of what your journey may look like with Malzahar. Now let's actually compare this with what the journey with Yasuo would look like, okay? Again, from 0 to 50%, it's actually very easy. Yasuo is from going from gold through, or silver all the way through to platinum 4 with Yasuo, it's very easy. People aren't good at versing Yasuo. It's easy to execute in terms of the basics. It wins basically every lane. The wind wall, the sustain, the shielding, the lack of mana, obviously not having mana, it makes it very awkward for these low elo players to really deal with. It preys upon the lack of fundamental understanding of the game from opponents. And due to this smooth sailing, you aren't really pushed or incentivized to learn wave management, resource management, tempo assessment, map awareness, roaming, etc. You don't need all that crap to win. Therefore, we won't learn it. Our brain is catered to get results. We're going to get rewarded for winning a certain way, and therefore we're going to replicate what actually gets us results. So inevitably, halfway through the maze at Platinum 4, shit starts to get hard. The game starts to get harder. Junglers start to punish your vulnerability and aggressive trading patterns. You start to verse like Hecarim jungles. They're going to run through your lane and kill you. The jungler's pathing becomes a little bit harder to track and a little bit, they're not just going to start bot and do a random 3-camp bot to top clear. They're going to start differing buffs and things like that, do unique paths. Supports are going to be roaming a little bit more. The enemies aren't going to randomly die to you at level 3 as a Yasuo. Q3s are going to be harder to hit. And this is where Yasuo's fail to accept reality. Because in order to get through this part of the maze, say from 50% in the middle of the maze all the way to 90%, say around Master Tier, we need to over-index, go hard on our micro optimization, trading patterns, matchup understanding, threat assessment, mid-game farming, side laning. But this stuff requires you to get into the details with a mindset of perfection. It's a very, climbing with a champion like Yasuo and Aurelia and Yone, it requires a very, very specific mindset. You actually genuinely have to love getting into the details and be a perfectionist. You got to nitpick every E, every missed auto attack, every missed Q, wave states, understanding jungle pathing, support roam tracking. It's ugly. It really is ugly and it's pretty brutal. But some people love this. They love this feast or famine style. It's feast or famine, baby. It's this very hard carry, go hard or go home type approach. And a lot of people really enjoy this. They love the mechanical optimization 1v9 style. Other people do not. Other people crumble. And when they play Yasuo and, they had that easy climb from silver all the way to platinum 4, they thought it was largely going to be freelo and it's going to be simply their ticket to diamond without needing to go too far in depth. And then they get a huge reality check. And we see this a lot specifically with Kassadin mains and we see it with Katarina mains. They love the idea of Yasuo to a certain point, or the idea of Kassadin or the idea of Katarina up until a certain point. again, notice how the similarities between this and the Malzahar journey is that you might like the idea of the champion in a certain way, but then when it gets to a different part of the journey and things start to change a little bit, because you didn't really understand the identity of the champion to a really in-depth level, we didn't understand the contract that we signed with Riot Games when picking that champion, we dig ourselves a pretty deep hole. Now, following on to get a bit even deeper picture, let's talk about a Galio or a Talon player. Now, these players will have a very easy time, usually climbing up all the way until a certain point, but it comes at a cost. It's usually quite easy for Talon players and Galio players to get to around Diamond 4 because the champions are just so good in solo queue, very easy to execute. It's relatively straightforward, but closing that gap from low Diamond to Master Tier Plus is absolutely brutal because they only know how to kill the Nexus one way. And as a result, their view of the game becomes very, very tunneled. Their view of the game is, it's very one-dimensional. It's almost as if someone sprinted through the maze up until like 80% or something like that, and then it got like incredibly hard, like instantaneously, and they're like, wait, what the hell? What got me to 80% here? I can't just keep sprinting. What's going on? So obviously, if you're climbing really, really fast up until this point, you get a massive shock. But what got you here isn't going to get you there. And Galio specifically gets you very comfortable with priority. You're forced to think about the map holistically. You're forced to think about 2v2s, diving, roams, snowballing, calling objectives. But this comes at a cost because your early lane is very easy. Micro optimization is tough and not very intuitive, very similar to Malzahar. Your matchup understanding as a result is very low because you're not really required to have an in-depth understanding of matchups because your laning is so straightforward anyway. Being inefficient with farm and XP can largely be glossed over. You can sacrifice that way for a roam topside. It doesn't really matter. You won't get punished for that. But then once we start to get to mid to higher diamond, the lane has become more competent. We start to get really bullied. And then how do these Galio players respond? Oh my god, LeBlanc is overpowered. Lucian Mid is OP. They are now being held responsible for their poor quality early laning, their lack of micro optimization, their ability usage, their inefficient roams. They, again, have to get very specific and tighten up their early laning, which is quite hard to do. It's not intuitive for them because they've played this certain way for such a long time. Now, to really simplify this the point I'm trying to get across here is that in a more simplistic way, the champion or champions you play shape your view of the game itself. Just like when you're growing up as a kid, your view of the world is shaped by your experiences as a child or as a teenager as you start to develop. So your worldview is literally being shaped year in, year out, very similar as it is in League. But when you're playing a certain champion, your view of the world is shaped in a very particular way. Now, another common path for a lot of people is the people that don't main a champion, the classic no champion mastery path. Now, this one is probably the most dangerous path to go down. This is where players really, really struggle. I actually had a client, dead serious. This is dead set. He got coaching from someone else. Not gonna say names. This coach recommended him to play 6 or 7 champions in Platinum. Now, my rule of thumb is you should never, ever, ever play more than 3 champions in Platinum. I mean, even 3, you don't even need more than even 2, but 3 absolute max. He got recommended to play 6 or 7. Now, what happened? Because this coach told him to, pick the champ for the comp and pick the meta, that sort of thing. And he did actually get from Platinum 4 to Platinum 1. But where did things end up? What happened? Well, eventually, as the meta shifted and things start to get a little bit tough, and then, maybe he gets to high Platinum and he loses a little bit of confidence, what happened? He went all the way back to gold because there was no foundation. There was no champ mastery to really build upon. Think about climbing League. When you build a house, you have a foundation. You have the reinforcement, you have the concrete. That is your foundation. In League, your foundation is your champion mastery, your way of viewing the world. In a way, another analogy I have for this exact thing is that you're kind of like, if you heard of that term, like a professional student, they go from they go to degree to degree to degree. They never actually graduate from anything. They kind of drop out every 1 or 2 years, and they kind of started heaps of differing degrees. But in order to be successful in a given area, or even if they just get a basic degree in every area, and they just switch around. In order to be successful, you got to kind of hone in. You got to get a master's or a PhD. You got to get very, very good at one thing. That's how you start to get a bit of success and get a really good quality job, right? So what happened, he went all the way back because there was no foundation. It's like building a house on sand. Another analogy is like going through the maze and you're attached to like a rubber band, and as soon as shit hits the fan, boom, you pop all the way back. And these people, they get severely damaged mentally. Their confidence goes to shit because they've got no really solid groundwork. And it's really sad to see. Now, yes, there are champions or certain paths that facilitate a more holistic view of the game. For example, if you were to learn the game through the lens of a low cooldown control mage like an Orianna or a Viktor, you do have a more holistic view of the game, but even this path comes at a cost because your climb is going to be much, much slower than it would be with another champion. So again, there's a trade-off. It's like, okay, you might have a more holistic view of the game, but your climb is going to be much longer, much more elongated. It's a grueling path, but the skill set flows onto a lot of the other paths. So if you were to play, say, Orianna to a high level, that skill, a lot of the skills you develop on that path is going to flow into all the different maze paths with all the different champions. Right, so that's why I think it is a great way to initially climb with a very fundamentally solid champion, holistic champion like an Orianna or a Viktor like that, but it's by no means essential. Now, my point in this video isn't really to kind of shame one path more than the other. It's not about that whatsoever. You can go down whatever path you want. I couldn't care less. Whether you want to go down the Malzahar, the Galio, the Talon, the Zed, Yasuo, doesn't matter to me. My point of this video is that no one path is better than the other. We just need to understand what we're getting ourselves into. We go down these paths and we compare ourselves with other people's paths and we get confused. When it's not all that confusing at all. A Yasuo's player's climb and their journey is going to look very, very different to a Talon's journey or a Galio's journey. They will naturally be stronger in certain areas and weaker in others. If we compare it to the maze, right? If everyone's maze path was very different, they're going to face differing challenges. Because you face differing challenges, you're going to have to develop a certain skill set in order to face those challenges. Therefore, you can't even compare people's path. You just genuinely can't even compare people's path. So obviously they're going to be better in certain areas. They're going to have mental blocks versus certain champions. If I'm playing an Orianna, I'm probably going to hate a Hecarim more than I would if I'm a LeBlanc main. And I'm not going to hate other champions as much as that LeBlanc. I'm not going to care about a CC as much. Vice versa, right? And just like in life, we all go down differing paths, right? We all have differing experiences that shape our worldview. We may be more inclined to be annoyed by certain things or affected by certain things. Other people, not so much. And the theme of a lot of my coaching and like what I'm trying to get across here is I want all of us to think more critically about what exactly is happening and why. Now, this might turn into a little bit of a rant. And I didn't want this video to be a rant, but look, I kind of can't control myself, and I feel like I'm obliged to share this message, is that, the lack of critical thinking and nuanced thinking in League is just downright concerning to me. 99% of things in the League community, in the League culture, it's laid out in black and white terms, which simply just doesn't match people's in-game experiences. We pretend the game is some solved masterpiece where if you just follow these steps, like you follow this, you do this, you're going to go from A to Z and you're going to get to challenger type thing. But in my experience coaching with each independent client, it looks a lot like this. Sometimes you go from A to C, then C to D, but then D all the way to M, then to O, then to P, then to Q. It's very scuffed. It's very chaotic. It's very brutal. The improvement isn't linear. It's non-linear. It's very confusing and complex because there's so many variables at play. It's all over the place. It's unique to each individual. So once we accept that it won't be all okay and fun and dandy, and we accept the chaotic nature of the climb, then we're going to be forced to think a little bit more outside the box and to be forced to kind of connect the dots in our own journey. Now note, there is no such thing as learning the game holistically across all champions. Alright, this is the thing that really pisses me off, is that people, and this is the thing I just fundamentally disagree with comparatively to many other coaches, is that you don't learn the game holistically. And I made this mistake as well, and I'm going to be the first to call myself out on this bullshit as well. I should have made this clear in a lot of my earlier videos. I teach a lot about concepts, right? And why I actually stopped doing those videos. And I mean, they're great and they're definitely useful. But what I realized is that the champion guides are the most valuable asset on my YouTube for a reason. Because the way it works is that you're meant to get very, very good at one thing. If you actually think of most pro players got their initial high elo the first time they climbed to Challenger through the lens of like 3 champions. Even take Showmaker, he was like a Katarina one trick or something like that. So they go really far down one maze path. And then at the end, they finally take a step back, kind of like stand on top of the maze and make sense of everything that happened. There's no such thing as like going, oh, okay, I go 20% here, 30% through that maze path, 40% through that maze path. You don't learn the game that way. You learn the game by going a very long way down 1 or 2 given paths and learn the games and develop a metric ton of champion mastery. And in my experience coaching, this is why I get very specific into matchups and very specific into champ identity and you know, all that sort of stuff, because that is what gets results. That's just what gets results. Again, for my 1,500 clients and what the people that don't get results and the people that do get results, the people that go deep on champ mastery just get the results. Now, if we knew, right, the invisible contract that we signed with Riot Games when we played our champion, you know, there's a little contract, say, I want to be a KO main. There's a contract that says, okay, Bob, you know, there's a little signature there, Riot Games, and there's your name there, Bob. I hereby understand what I'm getting myself into by playing KO. I'm going to have very little proactivity. I'm going to have to be very good at mid to late game to make up for the fact that I have no prio. I'm going to have to play from behind most games. My jungler's going to flame me. I'm going to lose every scuttle, blah, 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 blah. As long as you're okay with this shit, you're happy, you've signed this contract, you're all good. Okay, then don't complain. We'd see a lot less complaining if we actually understood what we're getting ourselves into when playing our champions. We'd see a lot less champion shaming, a lot less insecure judgments about elo inflation. And elo inflation in general is just an incredibly low-level topic that speaks to people's inability to understand champ and journey differences. No shit, one person is going to have a different skill set to you. You can't even compare 2 people. You literally cannot compare 2 people at the same rank. It's like comparing apples and oranges because the way they got there is very different. But the rank system doesn't lie. If someone climbs to a particular rank, they are that rank on that specific champion. Just because you get to a rank with, say you get to Challenger as a Pyke one trick, it's even hard to even call yourself a holistic Challenger player. Like, you can't compare the way a 1k Pyke player got Challenger and then the way a 1k LP Kayle player got Challenger. They're going to get to Challenger at very different skill sets. Yes, there's going to be some overlap here and there, but the way they get it is very different. And it's like the way people make money. Like in life, people make money different ways. We'll have different careers, right? Can you even say one is more quote unquote skilled than the other if they make the same amount of money? Well, maybe, but we'd have to really like deep dive and like assess many different areas of their lives. But would this even be a worthy endeavor? Why the fuck do we want to compare 2 people's journeys? Well, you tell me. In my opinion, it's a dead-end conversation stemming from a lack of growth mindset and a lack of security about one's level of play. A lot of insecurity. It's just a terrible conversation to have. And people just, again, they're not framing in the sense that people have differing skill sets and differing journey. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, going even deeper, due to people's past experiences before the game, as well as their personality traits, people actually have a much easier or harder time playing the game. For example, I work with players that League is their first PC game. These people struggle. They will be in silver and gold for an extended period of time, no matter how good I am as a coach. Because they're not comfortable with the keyboard and mouse. They're not comfortable with playing a very fast-paced multiplayer game. Some people come from consoles. Some people have played a shit ton of games before League. They played Counter-Strike or Overwatch or StarCraft or high level. But then you would think, well, okay, is that always an advantage? No. Sometimes, and on the flip side, some people that have been really good at another game can actually be disadvantaged due to their ego and over-reliance on talent, at least in my experience. And again, they have a hard time accepting small, consistent progression because they expect to get these pretty insane results. I've actually had very high elo Dota players over and over again join the MLA and simply give up at like Platinum 4, Gold 1. And it's pretty sad to see. And one of the main points I wanted to get across in this video, guys, is that the more aware of what you like about the game, the easier and the more streamlined the journey will be for you. You need to have a think about what you genuinely are naturally acclimated towards. All the time, people who like to think cerebrally about the game fall into the trap of playing Yasuo and regret it big time. I've had mechanical-oriented players that love the mechanical aspect of the game play Annie and just fucking hate it. Have a think about what you like about the game. And then ask plenty of questions. Be curious. And this is like an extra side note here. The entire bullshit around patch notes, meta, and all that nonsense. This is why I even stopped doing patch note rundowns. It's complete nonsense that screws people over because at the end of the day, it's just not important. 90% of the patch notes for like, I would say the large majority of the league population is just complete noise. I'll call it noise, 90% noise. Yes, if you're master tier and above, sure, the patch notes are quite impactful. But if you're below master tier, I would barely read the patch notes. It's not really that important. If it's something that I actually read a book recently that talked about this like New York trader and how he said he was very susceptible to kind of getting influenced by these outside sources. So what he did, he actually stopped reading the newspaper as much. And he said in his book, he said, if something was important enough, it got to my ears eventually. Like eventually I would find it out. I would rather not get influenced by all the crap and just block all the noise because the stuff that's important will come to me eventually. We listen way too much to the noise and we miss the important information. Okay, so unless you are master tier or above, pick a champ you love and commit, okay? Champ mastery, that's all that matters. Now, I also want to mention that, when these people go down these differing maze paths, they fail to realize along the way that you can be scarred. It's kind of like PTSD. Imagine if you go down like you're in Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire, you get like 50% through the maze and some like crazy shit just like tackles you and pulls you under the maze and like strangles you or some shit. And you escape. You might just be permanently scarred or some like form of PTSD. The exact same thing happens in League. I've seen time and time and time again, people either pick up severely bad habits from maining a champion for a very long time and autopiloting a champion for a very long time, and their view of the game gets so tunnel visioned, it's like you got to require therapy to get the hell out of this, man. It's crazy. I've seen people specifically with Yasuo, they climb all the way to Diamond 4 with Yasuo, they plateau hardcore at Diamond 4 with Yasuo, they say, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to climb with Yasuo anymore. I want to kind of go back and relearn the game. And then these players, they go all the way to Platinum 4 Goal 1, but their ego is so shattered, their view of the game is so distorted, it takes years to undo the damage that they've dealt during this journey. So if you're going to commit that hard to be a one-trick for that period of time, you better hope that that you understand what you're getting yourself into. Now, again, if you had an open mind, you really thought about the game holistically while playing this one champion, then you might not have this severe PTSD or anything like that. You might not be that scarred. But a lot of people, they lack the critical thinking and they think, okay, the game is played this way. It always should be played this way. And they create some pretty nasty habits. Something to keep an eye on. Now, again, the message and theme of my content moving forward on my channel, the theme of my coaching, the theme of my podcast, I want to really push the importance of nuanced thinking. I kind of want to break out of this mold of black and white. Everything is black and white, because it just really pisses me off because it's just not the way. League is way too complex. It's a very deep, rich, beautiful game, and this toxic narrative running through it that the game is solved and that you follow these 4 rules, you get to Challenger, and that you pick X champ and you're going to get to Challenger. No, everyone's path is different. And once I started to think in form of gray areas and understand people's individual experiences and started to think about all the multiple things at play here, I started to get better results for clients. I tried to what I tried to do when I initially started coaching was fit this cookie cutter formula. And yes, there's things I can take from everyone's journey and there's a lot of overlap, but a lot of it's not. Nothing is simple. Nothing is black and white. There are very, very few things in League where you can say, this is 100% the best play every time. And people who say that, a lot of time, if you hear people talk like that about the game, then that's a red flag in my opinion, because it's largely their interpretation based off the way they like playing the game in that server, in that rank, in that game with those players. Many, many, many times I've looked at a high-low VOD and I look at Chovy or whatever, and I'm like, there's just no way this is objectively the right play. But it works. That play worked. They made the play work because they had a read on the players' tendencies in that game. They know how people play in that server, at that rank. They know these players who play these champions. There's so much more at play. You cannot say 100% of the time this is the right play. No, there is a lot more. There's a lot more to that. And yes, there can be the overwhelming majority of a play right most of the time. But again, I just don't like that way of thinking. I still like to leave room for creative expression and all these other little elements around this. And again, another common question. I know this is going a bit over the place, guys, so bear with me. There's just a lot here I kind of wanted to talk about because I didn't really know how to fit this into a lot of videos. A common question I get is, Curtis, is it ever valid to just drop a champion that you have a lot of mastery on just because you don't really enjoy it anymore? Yes. Now, this again may seem contradictory to what I've said earlier on in the video, but at the end of the day, you must play the champs that you love. And in life, right, think about it. You might like, you think back when you're 15 or 13, you used to like, Blink-182 or whatever you liked. You like some like bands or some certain music. And then you're like, you're 18, you're 19, you're 20, and your music taste evolved, your food taste evolved, what you want to spend your time with evolves. Same thing in League. You might realize that it's okay. This champ just isn't for me. And look, I'm going to actively play this champ because it's easy to execute. And then as soon as I get to this rank, I'm going to pivot, go to something a little bit trickier, more demanding, because that's what I really want to play. That's okay. The whole point of this video is to really be more intentional with why you're doing what you're doing and understanding your journey and how your journey is unique. So what I said to this guy, I said, yeah, sure, man. As long as you're not dropping him because you just can't win, as long as you're dropping him because you just genuinely don't enjoy the champion anymore. But remember, you want to make sure that you're not jumping and shifting between the maze entrances all the time. You still want to commit. You still want to go as deep as you possibly can until you can until you really, really need to swap. So again, that might be a little bit contradictory, but I don't really know how else to put it. It's just the way it is. You must enjoy the champ you play. So as you can see, this entire shit show is quite messy, right? And it has a large influence on the type of climb one has. And we're not even mentioning past experiences before League, the varying degrees of emotional regulation, the varying degrees of discipline, mental problems like ADHD. I have a lot of clients that have ADHD, and that we did a podcast episode on ADHD. The amount of intensity, the amount of care one has towards a game. We're not even touching any of these stage 3 issues, right? The invisible narratives or the comparison he's making with his friendship group, the egos. We're not even touching any of this. We're literally just touching how your champion and how maybe some of your experiences with other games is influencing your climb, not even to mention any of the psychology-oriented stuff. So as you can see, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There is all this shit beneath the surface that is going to influence your climb. So the only common thread through all of this is that reviewing your games, getting into the details, and reflecting on your solo queue experiences always pays dividends. Yes, some people are going to be talented and can get away with having a poor process in the short term, but time is the true test of success. Show me these people that have a poor process, and I'll check on them in 2, 3, 4 years. There's a reason why I've been able to consistently be challenger for the past, 9 seasons or something? 7, 8 seasons? I got challenger again this season. There's a reason why people who've been playing as long as me are weirded out, stuck in diamond, can't climb anymore, stuck in bottom of master, whereas I'm getting better and better and better. Because my process is superior. And we just think in such short-term time frames with, oh, look at this guy, Curtis. He doesn't play in 3 blocks. He doesn't review. He doesn't do X, Y, Z. Well, first of all, call bullshit. You might just not see his reviews like Tyler One. He reviews off stream, but that's a different story. And imagine how good he would be if he did follow a process. But look where they're going to be in years and years and years from now, okay? You got to look at these people that don't follow the process. So last thing I want to highlight here is something I read recently in a book about randomness, where humans are very bad at understanding non-linearities in the sense that our brains expect an equal reward for equal effort. But in reality, this isn't the case whatsoever with League, right? Because sometimes you can play 100 games and you go nowhere, nothing clicks. But on the 101st game, it all just clicks together. And the reason this is the case, guys, is because the concepts aren't all independent in the game. Each of the concepts in League, if you think about, you've got walking the tightrope of pressure, understanding jungle pathing, good quality map awareness, good quality micro. They're not just complete independent entities. They're actually, I view them as they're all interdependent. They connect on each other. There's lines and arrows pointing between them all. So what happens in League is that improvement is actually non-linear. It's like a parabola in the sense that it's kind of like compound interest. The more money you put in, you don't just get that money, you get more interest because you're putting more money. So it's like compounding interest. So sometimes it's just a matter of finding that break point where you put enough stuff in, you put enough work in, finally some of those connections are made. Maybe it's something you see, you hear, and it all connects together. But because this is not how we expect improvement to be. Like, we expect, okay, I put in X amount of hours, I should get X amount of result. Because that's what we expect. There's a massive disconnect between like how improvement actually works in League versus what we think it is. This, combined with the alluring nature of what to focus on, makes climbing really brutal, because a common question is like, well, how do I know what to focus on? I experience different problems each and every game. Like, League is a very, very brutal game. And as you can see, there's so many things at play here that make not only the psychology of improving at the game hard, but, just the objective reality of improving the game just brutal. So, look, I know this was a little bit ranty. I thought that, there's probably something in here for everyone. I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts in a bit of a unique way. And look, at the end of the day, I just want you guys all to be curious. Don't take things at face value. Question my content. Question everyone else's content. The game isn't solved. It's always evolving. Like, be curious. And think in nuance, think in gray areas. Be comfortable with something not really making sense. Be willing to change your opinions. I change my opinions all the time because the game's changing. I'm changing my take on the game. I'm getting new experiences, doing coaching all the time. Don't be so tunneled in on this just because I believed in X statement. It has to be true for the next 1,000 years. Don't worry too much about that, all right? So relax, be more nuanced, be comfortable with chaos. Hopefully this gives you a little bit to think about. Keep grinding, and love to hear some of your thoughts on some of the things I spoke about here. I'm sure there's plenty of contradictions. I'd love to answer it. Cheers.